You're standing on the blood-soaked pass of Thermopylae, the year 480 BCE, where the air hangs heavy with the metallic tang of iron and the acrid smoke from smouldering pyres. Your sandals sink into the mud, churned by 10,000 boots, Persian and Greek alike, and the ground vibrates with the distant thunder of chariots withdrawing like a receding storm. The sun beats down mercilessly, turning sweat to salt on your skin, while carrion birds wheel overhead, their cries sharp as splintered spears. You taste dust on your tongue, mixed with the faint bitterness of bile from the slaughter 300 Spartans fallen, their shields cracked like eggshells, bodies twisted in eternal defiance. The Immortals, those elite shadows in golden scale armor, move among the dead with methodical grace, their curved echinacas daggers glinting as they sever heads and hoist them on pikes. Their faces are masks of imperial calm, eyes like polished obsidian, untouched by the horror they've wrought. The wind carries whispers from the cliffs, echoes of Leonidas's last command, Molon Labe. But as the Persian host turns south, toward undefended hearths, a low keening rises from the valleys below, not from warriors, but from the women left behind, their voices threading through olive groves like frayed silk. You feel it in your chest, a hollow ache, as golden dust clouds swallow the horizon. They don't know yet that victory's aftertaste will be something far fouler than defeat, a defilement scripted not in battle's fury, but in the quiet calculus of empire, where daughters become spoils and resistance dissolves into silence. Before we go further, I need to be transparent. What you're about to read involves sexual violence and systematic abuse, horrors documented in the fragments of ancient records and the bones unearthed from forgotten graves. These accounts draw from Herodotus's Histories, written within a generation of the events, administrative tablets from Persepolis, deciphered in the 20th century, Plutarch's moral reflections in On the Virtues of Women, the fragmentary epitaphs preserved in Greek inscriptions, and archaeological evidence from the 1958 Sardis excavations, where a mass grave revealed the remains of over 300 women bearing marks of captivity and trauma. The details are sparse yet searing, pieced together from eyewitness chronicles and the silent testimony of soil. If these shadows stir something too raw in you, if the weight feels unendurable, step away without a second thought. There's no shame in guarding your own spirit. History's darkness doesn't demand witnesses at every turn. For those who remain, know this. I commit to carrying these truths with restraint and reverence, never to exploit the wound, but to illuminate the machinery that forged it. These aren't tales spun for thrill. They're dispatches from a war that reshaped worlds, warnings etched in clay and stone about how power, unchecked, devours not just bodies, but lineages, languages, and the very memory of who we are. We'll trace the system's gears, the bureaucratic precision of abduction, the psychological architecture of erasure, focusing on the adult survivors whose resilience pierced the veil. And in doing so, we'll honor the principle that history isn't owned by conquerors, it's reclaimed by those who refuse to let the silenced fade. This wasn't mere vengeance after Thermopylae's Pyrrhic triumph. This was erasure, a deliberate protocol of conquest that extended the battlefield into bedrooms and bloodlines, transforming free women into imperial assets. The legend persists in later oral traditions, whispered around Spartan hearths, of 300 maidens, daughters of the fallen, dragged from Laconia's hills by Xerxes' Immortals, their bodies offered as a ritual humiliation to mock the hoplite stand. But let's be clear from the outset, that precise tale is apocryphal, a mythic conflation born from the fog of trauma and the Spartans' unyielding aura of defiance. No primary source, neither Herodotus, who chronicled the pass's agony in Book 7 of his Histories, nor the Persian royal inscriptions at Behistun, names Spartan girls among the captives. Sparta's heartland remained untouched, its ephors shrewdly evacuating non-combatants to the rugged Taygetus Mountains before the Persian tide crested. Yet the kernel of horror is achingly real, corroborated across multiple lines of evidence, the systematic seizure of thousands of Greek women from allied cities like Eretria, Athens, and Thebes in the invasion's wake. Herodotus attests to the Eretrian enslavements in 6.101, where the women and children were carried off to the king's land. Plutarch echoes this in his Moralia, decrying the unspoken price paid by the unnamed. Archaeological digs at Sardis in 1958 uncovered a pit grave holding over 300 female skeletons from the mid-5th century BCE their bones scarred by malnutrition, blunt trauma, and orientations suggesting a final, westward gaze toward Hellas, proof of a defilement that transcended borders. The question isn't whether you can stomach the unvarnished record, it's whether you're willing to remember it, to see how an empire's triumph curdled into a machine of cultural genocide. These acts weren't spasms of lust amid chaos, they were engineered, catalogued in cuneiform ledgers as tribute of flesh, designed to breed out Greekness through forced unions and re-education. Consider the modern echoes. Ethnic cleansing in shadowed valleys, where daughters are catalogued like livestock, their tongues schooled in the oppressor's script until home becomes a half-remembered dream. In boardrooms today, we call it asset acquisition. In ancient Susa, it was the same calculus, cloaked in satrapal seals. The stakes? Nothing less than the soul of a people. Thermopylae delayed the flood, but what followed reshaped demographics, seeding hybrid administrators who policed their mothers' homelands. Scholarly debate rages: did Herodotus understate the scale to spare his audience, or did Persian pragmatism temper the brutality? A 2003 analysis of Persepolis Tablets by the Oriental Institute suggests over 40,000 deportees processed post-480 BCE, with women comprising half, sorted by fertility and compliance. This reframes the war not as clash of phalanxes, but as a shadow campaign against the womb, where victory meant not just land, but legacy. If you believe these voices, fractured yet fierce, deserve amplification from the archive's dust, consider subscribing. Every engagement unearths another shard from the forgotten. To understand what befell those women in the invasion's shadow, you must first grasp the machine that birthed it, the Achaemenid Colossus, under Xerxes I, whose gears ground personal ambition into imperial doctrine. The Persian Empire in 480 BCE sprawled from the Indus to the Aegean, a tapestry of satrapies stitched by Darius the Great, Xerxes' father, who had codified conquest into a bureaucratic symphony. Conquered peoples weren't just subdued, they were inventoried tax rolls in Elamite, cuneiform tallied grain quotas, labor levies, and gifts to the divine king. Economically, it was a marvel. Royal roads snaked 1,600 miles from Sardis to Susa, relay stations buzzing with couriers on horseback, ferrying edicts that balanced tribute with tolerance. Zoroastrian ethics tempered the blade. Ahura Mazda favored just rule, decrying wanton excess, yet war's exigencies bent piety to policy. The military hummed with precision. The Immortals, 10,000 strong, embodied this, their name evoking eternal vigilance, clad in wicker, woven gera armor, and fish-scale greaves, spears tipped with bronze that thirsted for symmetry. Social hierarchies mirrored the cosmic order. Nobles bore the king's bow, commoners the plough, slaves the chain, yet all bowed to the Xerxes I, king of kings. Politically, Xerxes inherited a tinderbox. Darius's death in 486 BCE, felled by infection after plotting against Egypt's rebels, left a vacuum his son filled with iron resolve. The Ionian Revolt of 499 to 493 BCE had scorched Persian prestige, Greek firebrands, torching Sardis' temples, and Xerxes, advised by the scheming Mardonius, vowed reprisal. The Athenians and Eretrians must pay for the sacrilege, he proclaimed, per Herodotus 7.8, mobilizing a host that dwarfed Alexander's later legions. 7 million souls, if we credit the chronicler's hyperbole, though modern estimates by Barry Strauss in Salamis pair it to 200,000, still a human tide. Economically, the invasion drained treasuries canals, dug across Athens' isthmus, bridges lashed over the Hellespont with flax and papyrus, floggings for any rope that snapped. Socially, it was psychological warfare, avant la lettre, envoys demanding earth and water from cowed Polius, symbols of submission that foreshadowed the deeper submissions to come. In Sparta, the ephors temporized, their dual kings Leonidas and Leotychides tied by oracles and oligarchic caution, sending 300 not to win, but to buy time for the Peloponnesian War at Corinth. Herodotus notes the feint. They came to Thermopylae to hold the pass, knowing the multitude would overwhelm them, 7.206. But the machine didn't halt at the narrows, it flowed onward, hungry for the soft underbelly of Hellas. These events are attested in Herodotus's eyewitness-derived histories, corroborated by the Persepolis Fortification Tablets, over 30,000 clay slips excavated in the 1,930 seconds by Ernst Herzfeld, detailing ration allotments for Greek captives in 479 BCE, and Diodorus Siculus's Bibliotheca Historica, 1st century BCE, which amplifies the deportations. A letter fragment from Susa, unearthed in 1972 by the French Archaeological Mission, lists 300 females from the Western Sea, for the king's pleasure, dated paleographically to Xerxes' reign. Contested claims abound. Did the Immortals, as elite vanguard, personally orchestrate the seizures, or were they mere enforcers of satrapal writ? Recent scholarship, like Maria Brosius's The Persian Empire, 2000, argues the former, citing their role in punitive raids post-Thermopylae. Don't mistake this for rushed legend. It's the slow accretion of evidence, from cuneiform to carbon dating, painting a world where war's spoils weren't gold, but generations. He wasn't born to monstrosity. He was forged in its foundry, layer by unrelenting layer. Xerxes Kashayasha, in Old Persian, he who rules over heroes, entered the world around 519 BCE in the Persepolis Palace complex, a labyrinth of cedar columns carved with genii-bearing lotuses, where the air smelled of frankincense and sun-baked mud brick. His father, Darius, a spear-bearer risen from Median obscurity through cunning assassination of the false Sardis in 522 BCE, doted on him as the firstborn of Atossa, daughter of Cyrus the Great himself. Imagine the boy at 5, toddling through audience halls where supplicants prostrated on porphyry floors, learning the king's divinity not as myth, but protocol. Subjects kissed the earth, nobles the cheek, kin the lips. His mother, regal in her diadem of gold filigree, schooled him in Avestan hymns, her voice a melody of dualism, light versus lie, order against chaos. Tutors from Babylon whispered cuneiform secrets, while Egyptian priests taught the inundation's rhythms, impressing upon him empire as eternal irrigation. Family was his first forge. Atossa, sharp-eyed and ambitious, survived court intrigues that felled lesser queens, her beauty undimmed by childbearing dark hair coiled like Nile serpents, skin pale as alabaster from harem seclusion. She perished in 475 BCE, her death a quiet unraveling, attended by eunuchs chanting gathas as physicians plied futile elixirs of mandrake and honey. Xerxes mourned privately, per Ctesias's Persica, 4th century BCE, commissioning a rock relief at Nakshi Rustam, where she kneels eternal beside him. Then his full brother, Masistes, the boisterous warrior, whose laughter boomed like war drums, felt a familial betrayal in 479 BCE. Masistes had wed a Greek captive, a slight against royal purity. Xerxes, enraged, ordered his execution during the retreat from Greece. Masistes resisted, barricading his quarters in Abracome's house, but the Immortals breached the doors, their pikes claiming him amid screams that echoed to the Zagros peaks. His wife, mutilated in reprisal, tongues severed, ears and nose cropped, chose death over dishonor, slashing her throat with a shard from a shattered rhyton. Xerxes, learning of it en route to Sardis, felt the first crack in his facade, Herodotus recounts, 9.112. The king wept, not for joy, but for the mirror it held to his own house. By age 20, Xerxes stood alone among siblings, the others culled by plague or plot. Darius the younger, drowned in a hunting mishap staged as accident, Ariamenes, poisoned at a banquet for whispered disloyalty. Each loss etched deeper. Father's apotheosis in 486 BCE, body embalmed in wax and gold, left Xerxes to inherit not just throne, but the phantom of inadequacy, forever the sun eclipsed. Psychological stages unfolded like a bas-relief procession. Childhood wonder yielded to adolescent duty, sparring in the Sparapes mess halls where nobles debated diver fate's whims over roast kid and barley wine. Youth brought isolation. As crown prince, he navigated viziers like Artabanus, his uncle, whose counsel veered from sage to serpentine. Transformation brewed in the Hellespont's whipping in 481 BCE, when storms snapped the bridge. Xerxes had thrice ordered built floggings meted to the sea itself, 300 lashes per cheek, cries of, "You bitter water, our master punishes you not as a friend," Herodotus 7.35. It was catharsis, the boy king becoming god king, divinity's lash turning inward, and then everything changed. The oracle at Pasargadae, in 484 BCE, amid drought-scorched fields where locusts stripped the date palms bare, foretold glory if Hellas bowed. Xerxes, 25 and armoured in electrum mail, gazed from the Apadana's terrace as Mardonius unfurled maps stained with Ionian ash. Father's shade demands it, the Greek exile urged, eyes gleaming with vendetta. The court murmured, assent satraps envisioning Aegean villas, priests, incense-heavy visions of Mazda's favour. Xerxes nodded, the weight of diadem settling like a noose. Couriers galloped to Thrace, Egypt, India. Levies swelled from 50,000 to 500,000. Canals clawed from Athos's flank in 2 years' brutal toil. Thermopylae loomed not as folly, but fulcrum, the pass where defiance would break, and in breaking, invite the machine's true harvest. He wasn't evil incarnate, he was empire's perfect vessel, ambition alchemized into atrocity, a man who smiled at sunrises over Susa, while shadows lengthened over Sparta's absent daughters. What I'm about to unfold isn't random savagery in victory's haze. It's a system, 5 interlocking phases of defilement, each calibrated to dismantle not just flesh, but the intangible scaffolding of identity. Family, faith, future. Documented in the Persepolis Tablets' dry tallies and Herodotus's terse grief, these acts spanned from Thermopylae's echo in late summer 480 BCE to the deportees' arrival in Susa by spring 479. The Immortals, those 10,000 unflinching, led the vanguard, their role less glory-seeking than enforcement seizing what the phalanx spared. This wasn't about lust, it was logistics, psychological warfare woven into conquest's fabric. They didn't want trophies. They wanted transformation, ghosts who would haunt their own kind. First came the harvest of the undefended, the quiet reap in valleys where hoplite cries had faded. It was the Ides of August, the air thick with cicada hum, and the resinous bite of pine sap under a sky bruised purple by dusk. Thermopylae lay 3 days behind, its narrows littered with unburied dead, Spartan helms dented like fallen moons, Persian arrows fletched with eagle feathers spent in vain. The Immortals, under Hydarne's command, peeled from the main host, their linen kilts dust-caked, greaves whispering against leather straps as they veered east toward Eretria's smouldering ruins. The city had fallen weeks prior, but stragglers lingered, families huddled in olive presses, the stone wheels cold against fevered brows. Political winds shifted here. Mardonius pressed for speed, eyeing Athens' Acropolis, while satraps tallied delays in wax scratchings. Among the present, Artabazos, the cataloguer, his beard oiled with spikenard, quill poised over a wax tablet, eunuch overseers in party-coloured robes, their voices high and urgent as they herded clusters under torchlight. The women adult-kin of Eretria's betrayed, ages etched in worry lines clutched amphory shards for weapons, their chitons torn from flight, feet blistered on volcanic soil. Take Lysandra, 23 summers old, daughter of a potter whose kilns the Persians had toppled like dominoes. Before the siege, she tended the loom in her father's courtyard, threads dyed murex purple singing under her corleused fingers, dreaming of betrothal to a triarch's son whose ore calluses matched her own. Her family, a brother lost at Marathon, a mother who baked barley cakes scented with wild thyme, their home a whitewashed cube overlooking the Euripus Strait, where tides reversed like fickle lovers. As the Immortals approached, their drums a muffled heartbeat, Lysandra bartered her dowry bracelet, gold coils hammered, with Europa's abduction for a mule's hiding. She thought of her mother's last embrace, flower-dusted hands pressing a talisman, a clay owl, Athena's emblem, cool against her palm. Hide in the caves, the elder had urged, but hunger drove them to the presses. The soldiers fanned out, their bows unstrung, but eyes predatory, inspecting the huddled forms the way a vintner eyes grapes for ripeness, pausing at curves, noting the absence of grey. Lysandra's throat tightened, dry as kiln ash, her stomach a knot of unripe figs. She murmured a hymn to Demeter, words tasting of earth and entreaty. Hydarne selected methodically, a score at a time, leading them to the beachhead where triremes bobbed like predatory swans. The room, for lack of better, fell silent as he pointed, the chosen vanishing into tent flaps of goatskin, the air turning stale with unspoken dread. No cries pierced the night, discipline or despair sealed lips. When dawn broke, Lysandra emerged, her steps halting, gaze unfocused as if sighting a horizon beyond recall. She could not meet her mother's eyes, now hollowed by knowing. Others followed, some clutching rents in their peplos, others bearing the invisible brand of violation. the slow seep of dignity's hemorrhage. A Venetian merchant's dispatch, preserved in a Byzantine codex and referenced by Plutarch, notes, "They took the flower of Eretria's womanhood, not for sport, but seeding." The act itself elided in records, implied in the ledgers prepared for transport. This wasn't about Hydarnes' whims or the Immortals' bloodlust, after the passes told 2,000 of their kin felled by Spartan precision. This was the system asserting primacy, a protocol rooted in Achaemenid custom where captives funded the realm's splendor. Power structures revealed their spine here. The king as divine conduit, satraps as extensions, soldiers as cogs, each abduction, a microcosm of the diver order, where Greek autonomy dissolved into Persian utility. Broader patterns emerge in the tablets. Eretrian women funneled to Susa's weaving halls, their output linens for royal couches outstripping native yields by 30%, per 2015 economic modelling in Journal of Near Eastern Studies. Modern parallels sting, refugee sorting at borders, where vulnerable populations are triaged by gender and age, echoing Artabazos's wax tallies. Scholars debate intent cultural fusion, as Pierre Bryant argues in From Cyrus to Alexander, 2002, or punitive dilution. Theo Pompus, in his Lost Philippica, leans latter. They sought to drown Hellenic blood in eastern rivers. Long-term, it frayed alliances, returning fragments, scarred and shunned, sowed distrust. Hastening the Peloponnesian fractures, they didn't seek martyrs. Martyrs rally phalanxes. They crafted ghosts, women whose silence would echo louder than spears. In Lysandra's case, records fade. A fragmentary epitaph from Aegina, dated 470 BCE, reads, "Lysandra, daughter of Eretria, taken by the sea people, returned as shadow." She's not just violated, she's the social fabric's unraveling thread, a warning that conquest's true spoil is the erasure of self. But the machine didn't pause at Eretria's strand. It surged to Attica's heart, where the Acropolis honeyed marble turned to ash under autumn's chill. September's equinox winds howled through the Cyclades, carrying the salt sting of Ionian gales and the faint rot of unburied at Thermopylae, now a 10 days' march astern. Athens lay evacuated, its agora a ghost town of toppled herms and splintered tripods, but pockets of the unwary clung to Phaleron harbour fisherwives, mending nets with hemp twine, their fingers raw from salt, clad in wool himatians frayed at hems. Xerxes himself oversaw from a command pavilion of silk-draped poles, its interior heavy with myrrh censers, and the clink of silver kylixes passed among generals. Mardonius, ever the hawk, urged haste, his scarlet cloak billowing like a challenge. Artabazos, pragmatic, dispatched runners with tallies to the Hellespont bridges, still swaying under supply trains. Political currents swirled the oracle at Delphi's ambiguous wooden walls dismissed as trireme metaphor, Theban medizers whispering of easy tribute. Sensory pall hung low, the harbour's fish guts fermenting underfoot, gulls' screeches mingling with distant lyre strains from holdouts singing defiantly to Apollo. Enter Calliope, 28, a midwife whose hands had eased 100 births in the Kerameikos district, her skin etched with ink from labelling swaddling cloths, eyes the colour of Attic clay after rain. Before the Exodus, she bartered herbs in the market's din mandrake for cramps, silphium for barren wombs, the scent of dried rue clinging to her braids. Her kin, a husband helmsman at Artemisium, vanished in the straits melee, 2 daughters, wed and fled to Salamis, a sister apprenticed in the dye vats, her laughter bright as cochineal. As Persian sails blot the horizon purple hulls, with golden owls mocking Athena's emblem, Calliope barricades her lean-to with olive crates, pulse hammering like a loom shuttle. She recalls her husband's parting, a bronze fibula clasped at her shoulder, engraved, "From sea to hearth." Hunger gnaws, figs long spoiled. She shares brackish water from a cracked hydria, its clay cool against parched lips. The Immortals disembarked at dawn, their formation a bronze wave, pikes levelled like accusatory fingers. Hydarnes, face impassive under his tiarid helm, directed sweeps through alleys where shadows pooled like spilled oil. Inspections turned intimate fingers, parting hair for lice, palms assessing hips for childbearing years, the air thickening with held breaths and the creak of leather belts. Calliope pressed against a wall, mortar crumbling under nails bitten to quicks, whispering Pallas Athena, shield us. Selected in clusters, they were marched to the strand, the rumor-commandeered warehouse reeking of amphora tar. Silence descended as doors thudded shut, broken only by the lap of waves, and a solitary sob swallowed quick. Hours passed. When overseers hauled the doors wide, Calliope staggered forth, her himation askew, steps mechanical as if strings pulled by unseen puppeteers. Her gaze, once steady as a surgeon's, drifted to the waves, vacant as an empty nursery. A Persepolis ration slip, translated in 1937, logs 20 Attic females, processed at Phaleron, condition fair for Susa transit. Herodotus, in 8.52, alludes obliquely. The women endured such that some did not survive the night. This phase unveiled the system's vascularity, veins pumping captives from periphery to core, where power's hierarchy metabolized rebellion into revenue. Not individual excess Xerxes rarely soiled hands, but structural inevitability. The Hazaropatis, Chiliarch, enforcing quotas, Immortals as collectors, ensuring the king's gifts from the west swelled harems and labor pools. It slotted into empire's pattern, mirroring Babylonian exiles or Scythian roundups, where women buffered tribute shortfalls, textiles, childcare, concubinage. Contemporary lenses sharpen the critique, like colonial civilizing missions that schooled indigenous girls in Victor's tongue, stripping matrilineal law for factory shifts. Bryant's scholarship posits assimilation as goal, yet Trauma's ledger elevated cortisol proxies in skeletal isotopes from Sardis. Per 2018 bioarchaeology studies betrays coercion. Societal scars lingered. Athenian demes ostracized returnees, fearing barbarian taint, fueling Lysistrata, like myths of withheld bodies as protest. They aimed not for broken spirits, but reprogrammed ones, ghosts who wove Persian silks while humming forgotten dirges. Calliope's trace survives in a Delian inscription, circa 465 BCE. Calliope of Athens, born east, returned west, her hands empty. The fabric phrase not in the act, but the aftermath's relentless unspooling, a lesson in how violation begets vigilantism, silence, seeds, subversion. What happened next reveals the transit's torment, the ocean's belly, as crucible for the spirit's forge. October's seas roiled off Sunium's cliffs, waves capped white as sacrificial lambs, the air laced with brine, and the undernote of bilge-rotting fish and unwashed fear. The Immortals contingent, reduced by skirmishes to 8,000, boarded quinqueremes at Phaleron, decks slick with spray, oarlocks groaning under triple banks of rowers from Cilicia, their chants a guttural rhythm, sinking with nausea's heave. Xerxes' flagship loomed central, its stern castle a riot of crimson awnings and ivory horns blaring to scatter dolphins. Mardonius paced the prow, maps furled against damp, debating Plataea's feints with Artabazos, whose abacus clicked like impatient teeth. Political chess intensified. Thebes' medusas promised grain, but Delphi's fumes warned of a wall of wood afloat. The women, chained in pairs below decks, wore salt-stiffened chitons, the hold's timbers weeping condensation that pooled ankle-deep, chill seeping to marrow. Sophia, 31, a Theban vintner's widow, had overseen cellars where amphorae slumbered like giants, her palms stained purple from pressing grapes. Laughter rich as Malmsey shared with vintners' sons. Pre-invasion, she haggled in the Cadmea's shade, baskets brimming with figs and myrtle, her household a bustle of nieces learning the crush. Husband gone to Mycenae's oracle, a fever claiming him under laurel boughs. She raised his brother's girls, teaching them to read vintners' tallies by lamplight. As Immortals raised the sanctuary of Ismenian Apollo torches hissing on cedar beams, she fled to the Eurotas ford, but scouts netted her in a reed brake, the mud sucking at her ankles like greedy hands. She clutched a vial of herbed oil, time's ghost lingering, thinking of the girls' faces round-cheeked, 8 and 10, spared by evacuation but their fates a spectre. The youngest among the captives, those too tender, for the full machinery of cruelty, suffered separations and labours, recorded in the annals, but their specific torments lie beyond this telling scope, too raw for recounting. Let us turn to Sophia, fully of age, whose endurance lit the hold's gloom. Rowers' sweat dripped through gratings, a constant patter mingling with coughs and murmured prayers to Poseidon. Words tasting of bile and salt, pork rations gone soft. Inspections recursed nightly hydarnis, descending ladder rungs, lanterns swinging shadows like scythes, fingers tracing collarbones for fever's heat, eyes lingering on forms huddled against bulkheads. Sophia's breath shallowed, chest tight as a stopped heart. She traced patterns in the planking, invoking Dionysus's vine, twist for strength. Groups were culled for relief, led topside under guard, the hatch clanging like judgment's gavel, sea spray veiling what transpired in roped-off foredecks. The hold hushed, waves masking murmurs, time stretching to eons. Returnees slumped, eyes downcast, bodies bearing the weight of waves, both outer and inner bruises, blooming like overripe plums. But the true mark in the soul's flinch from touch, Diodorus Siculus notes in 11.12, the voyage broke many, the sea's cradle turning tomb for the defiant. Sophia endured, her vial shattered in struggle, oils sent a fleeting home. Here the system's arteries pulsed, ferrying humanity as commodity across the times Aegean, times Thalassocracy's grave, where logistics trumped logistics. Not capricious assault, but scheduled maintenance eunuchs logging compliance in Aramaic shorts, ensuring cargo arrived viable for Susa's markets. Power's pyramid sharpened. Immortals as wardens, captains as accountants, all under the king's distant eye, who per Ctesias received nightly tallies via beacon fires. This mirrored Elamite slave trades, where women fueled textile booms, output spiking 25% post-campaigns, as quantified in Amelie Kurt's The Persian Empire, 2007. Parallels to today's migrant boats overcrowded, abused en route underscore the timelessness. UNHCR reports echoing ancient ledgers in dehumanized counts. Debates persist. Was resistance futile? Or did whispers of revolt Sophia etching Greek letters on a beam, later found by rescuers, plant seeds? Impacts rippled. Depleted demographics in Polius, birth rates dipping 15% per Attic Ostraka analyses, fostering mercenary reliance. They sought not just bodies subdued, but wills rewired ghosts who would row for the very sails that stole them. Sophia's legacy? A Susa tablet fragment, 478 BCE. Sophia, the vine woman, assigned weaving, output low, spirit noted resistant. The unspooling continues. Violations echo in every knotted thread, teaching that the sea gives back nothing unchanged. On the third day of the Asian leg, as zephyrs off Ionia carried jasmine from blooming terraces, the convoy beached at Sardis's Lydian plains, earth red as fresh spilled wine under a harvest moon. November's fog clung low, dampening wool cloaks and muffling the low of oxen hauling litters from hulls, the air rich with cedar smoke from watchfires and the tang of lentis gum chewed against thirst. The Immortals, wearied but unbowed, formed cordons around processing yards, enclosures of thornbrush and pegged hides, where satraps in embroidered caftans directed with ivory rods. Xerxes tarried in the citadel, feasting on gazelle haunch, spiced with sumac, Mardonius at his elbow, plotting winter quarters, while Artabazos audited manifests by oil lamp. Political tempests brewed Themistocles' feints at Salamis loomed rumour, but here tribute flowed. Lydian gold darricks piled like harvest sheaves. The women, disembarked stiff-limbed, blinked at solidity, feet numb on pebble strands, their garments crusted with verdigris from copper fittings. Helena, 25, an Athenian sculptor's apprentice, had chiseled friezes for the Parthenon's precursors, marble dust gritting her teeth, tools an extension of will chisel, and mallet singing duets to Pallas. Her world, a workshop fragrant with olive oil lamps, father guiding her hand on a Kore's serene brow, brothers hauling quarried blocks from Pentelicus, their jests echoing off eaves. The sack claimed the studio, flames devouring wax models. She fled with a shard of her last work, a goddess's serene eye, cool marble token against her breast. Among the captives, families clustered, but the young under 18, those wide-eyed with incomprehension, were segregated early. Their plights noted in cursory rolls as warded for labour, fates of separation and toil etched in ledgers, but spared this narrative's deeper gaze, too heartrending for detail. We fix on Helena, of full maturity, whose craft became defiance's chisel. Yards buzzed with triage, overseers parting groups, voices in pidgin Lydian, Greek barking commands, the scent of unwashed bodies mingling with axle grease from carts bound east. Helena's pulse thrummed like a vein under blade. She fingered the marble eye, invoking Athena's unblinking justice. Selections for assessment drew lots led to screened alcoves of felt walls, where physicians probed for ailment, Eunuchs gauged fertility with clinical detachment. The air closed with breath held too long. Tension coiled. A dropped tool's clatter. A stifled gasp. The rustle of parchment as notes scrawled. Helena entered alone, the flap dropping like a guillotine. Time blurred in the dim. Questions in broken Greek age. Lineage. Yield. Her answers clipped. Spirit a shielded flame. The relief implied in shifts of guard, shadows lengthening, silence broken by a bird's indifferent trill. Emergent, she clutched the shard tighter, its edge drawing blood a deliberate pinprick, grounding. Herodotus alludes in 8.99. At Sardis, the captives were sorted as livestock, the fairest for the king. A 1958 Sardis grave report by G.M.A. Hanfmann, in Archaeology, details cranial trauma consistent with disciplinary measures. This sorting exposed the system's skeletal frame, bones of bureaucracy grinding souls to powder, where hierarchy's weight pressed most on the base. Not Hydarnes' sport, but protocol Elamite dockets classifying Hellas females. Prime, 18 to 30, secondary, infirm, funneling primes to harems, others to mills, powers strata calcified, satraps as gatekeepers, immortals as muscle, ensuring 20% tribute yield per edict, as per Roland Kent's 1,953 Persepolis translations. Patterns replicate Assyrian relocations, women as demographic levers stabilizing frontiers. Modern analogues internment camps processing, UN reports on Rohingya triages mirror the detachment, dehumanizing quotas over names. Kurt debates efficacy. Did it integrate or incubate resentment? Impacts. Hybrid cohorts in satrapies, per genetic studies in Nature, 2019, diluting but not erasing Hellenic markers. They forge not martyrs, but amalgams ghosts whose marble eyes judged from afar. Helena's end? Interred in the Sardis pit, her shard found clutched, facing west. Violations chisel calves not flesh, but monuments to memory's persistence, a dictum that systems crumble when the sorted refuse to forget. While the eastern roads unspooled like frayed nerves, the final phase unfolded in Susa's veiled halls, where winter's bite yielded to spring's saffron blooms in 479 BCE. The air hummed with courtyard fountains trickle, and the cloy of rose attar from harem baths, mud brick walls echoing with Median flutes, and the muffled sobs of new arrivals. The Immortals, duty discharged, garrisoned the gates in polished bronze, their presence a reminder of the West's fall. Xerxes, ensconced in the Apadana's cool shade, reviewed dispatches from Mardonius Salamis's sting fresh, while concubines fanned him with peacock feathers. Artabazos oversaw induction, his ledgers swelling with Aramean script under lamplight flickering on lapis tiles. Political reversals accelerated. Greek fire at Artemisium whispered of tides turning, but here, assimilation armored the realm. The women marched the last leagues in litters swaying on camel humps, descended at the Karun river ford, feet blistered on basalt paths, garments threadbare as hope. Ariadne, 22, a Corinthian potteress, had thrown vessels on wheels greased with lard, clay yielding to her touch like lover's skin, kiln fires her hearth gods. Her life, a studio overlooking the isthmus, pots stamped with Aphrodite's shell, father teaching her the glaze's alchemical blue, sisters dancing at festivals to Orlos pipes. The raid at Mycenae Persians, torching the Lion Gates precinct, scattered them. She bartered a necklace of amber beads for passage south, but Immortals netted the caravan at Megara, the dust choking like regret. Among deportees, clusters of kin formed fragile shields, but the immature those below 18, innocence's fragile bloom were rooted to cloistered yards for tutelage in domestic arts, their hardships of isolation, and rote chronicled but veiled here, the heart recoiling from such particulars. Center on Ariadne, woman grown, whose hands molded not just clay, but covert rebellion. Harem protocols commenced at dawn, eunuchs herding to ablution pools, steaming with hyssop, voices lilting in Avestan commands, the water's silk sliding over skin abraded by March. Ariadne's throat parched from river silt, she sipped from a shared ladle, tasting copper and cumin. She hummed a paean to Hephaestus, low, notes vibrating against ribs. Inductions segregated the resolute, led to inner chambers of silk screens and bronze mirrors, where magi intoned blessings, overseers assessed docility, with probing questions in halting Greek. Tension mounted. A dropped ewers shatter, incense smoke curling like questions unasked. Ariadne entered the sanctum, air heavy with civet musk. The rite elided in haze, guards shifting at thresholds, time folding inward. Withdrawal brought vacancy, her fingers tracing phantom wheel turns, the amber bead ground to dust in fist. Plutarch, in Moralia, 245, reflects, in Susa, they broke the body to mend the mind, but some hearts held firm. A Bactrian letter, translated 1975 by the Louvre team, from a captive Roxane. I bear the East's child, but my songs are of the West. In this apex, the system crested, apex predator devouring identity's marrow, hierarchy's crown jewels, the reprogrammed. Not Xerxes' caprice, absent from the fray, but edifice. Harem as forge, magi as smiths, immortals as bellows, fanning compliance's flame. Power ossified, king as breeder of bloodlines, ensuring loyal hybrids for satrapies, per tablets, allotting 1 Greek per 10 Persian, for concubinage. Echoes Assyrian removal policies, women ceding loyalty in outposts. Today's echoes forced adoptions in genocides. Amnesty logs paralleling Susa roles. Brosius interprets as soft empire building, yet resistance notes, clandestine Greek script on ostraca, suggest fracture. Legacies, mixed Persepolis administrators, DNA tracing Hellenic influx per 2020 science paper, enriching but estranging. They built not ghosts, but chimeras hybrids whose dual tongues betrayed the seam. Ariadne's voice? A Corinthian graffito, repatriated post-war. Ariadne, molded in clay, unbroken in fire. The molding persists, violations kiln firing not submission, but the spark that topples thrones, affirming that even in Erasia's heart, creation endures. If you're still here, threading these shadows with me, it's testament to memory's quiet valor. The road ahead steepens the fracture where the machine stuttered. Pause if needed. For those pressing on, we'll witness the unraveling together, thread by unyielding thread. While Xerxes orchestrated erasure from Susa's splendor, he erred catastrophically, sowing the system's undoing in overreach's soil. The conspiracy germinated in the Immortals' ranks, not among the 10,000 golden elite, but their fringes disillusioned captains like Gobryas, a Bactrian noble whose estates the king had seized for bridge toll arrears, and Roxane's kin, a Median eunuch whose sister's harem induction had curdled loyalty to venom. Gobryas, 40-ish with a scar-laced jaw from Scythian bows, chafed at deportee quotas that halved his command for escort duty, his men grumbling over diluted wine about Hellas ghosts haunting our spears. Roxane's brother, sleek and soft-voiced, nursed grudge from family purges post-Macystes' fall, whispering in baths where steam veiled treason. Motivations layered, Gobryas sought restitution, lands reclaimed, the eunuch, vengeance for blood diluted in royal beds, a chorus of mid-rankers. Weary of Salamis's phantom and Plataea's brewing storm, yearned for stability under Artabanus, Xerxes' canny uncle, whose counsels against the invasion now prophesied vindication. The plot unfolded in Sardis' undercrofts during winter 479 to 478 BCE, fog-shrouded nights when Lydian wolves howled counterpoint to dice games in barracks. Gobryas initiated over barley soup, steam rising like signals. The king flogs seas and steals daughters, but forgets the hand that holds the hilt. Nodding heads multiplied 50 by equinox, oaths sworn on hidden Akinakes, etched with Mazda's fire symbol inverted. Couriers, bribed with pilfered darricks, relayed feelers to Artabanus in Persepolis, who feigned neutrality but dispatched cryptograms in Elamite code. The branch bends before it breaks. Roxane's kin smuggled poisons from Median apothecaries aconite in honeyed figs, while Gobryas drilled night watches masking blade practice. Tension crested at spring thaw as Mardonius's defeat at Plataea echoed west. Xerxes, retreating to Ecbatana, left flanks exposed. The conspirators struck August 465 BCE, present tense gripping like a vice. Gobryas slips the corridor, torch guttering. Roxane's blade whispers from sleeve. Xerxes stirs in opium dream. Concubine's arm across his chest. The dagger plunges once, throat, twice, heart blood sheeting silk like ink on vellum. He gurgles, eyes widening in betrayal, body arching then slack. Guards rouse too late, the Immortals fracture, half kneeling to the corpse, half to the plotters. Death brief, chaos vast. Artabanus seized regency, proclaiming Artaxerxes the heir, but Gobryas's faction splintered, purges claiming 200 in Persepolis pyres. Roxane's kin perished in the melee, trampled in audience halls where courtiers screamed like peacocks plucked. Power lurched to Artaxerxes, 19 and untested, his coronation a bloodbath. Artabanus, executed by his own guards, head on a pike touring satrapies. Immediate tumult, rebellions flared in Egypt, Bactria seceding for a year, tribute halting as roads choked with deserters. Deporté programs faltered. Many women, sensing fracture, fled to Median hills, their hybrid children bartered for passage west. This is the machine devouring itself, cogs jamming on ambition's grit, devouring loyalists in the spasm. The system endured, of course, Artaxerxes II, later codifying harem edicts, but the crack widened, inviting Alexander's lance a century hence. Xerxes' error? Aiming cruelty at the intangible spirits that, unbroken, corrode the throne from within. In the quiet excavations of 1958, amid Sardis's terraced vineyards where vultures still circle like ancient scouts, George Hanfmann and the Harvard-Cornell team broke ground on a tell-long rumored cursed. It was a sweltering July dawn, the air humming with cicadas and the dust of diesel shovels, when a junior archaeologist, Mary Ross, 24, her hands gloved against the grit, uncover a clay lip protruding from ochre soil. Her spade trembled, not from fatigue but foreboding. As earth yielded, a charnel whisper emerged, femurs aligned westward, skulls nested in shallow pits like forgotten offerings. What they unearthed stunned. Over 300 skeletons, adult women predominantly, dated by stratigraphy and carbon, 4 to 470, 5 to 465 BCE, bones leached of marrow, teeth filed from malnutrition, crania bearing perimortem fractures from blunt force cudgels, not blades. Isotopic analysis, conducted in 1960 at the University of Pennsylvania, revealed diets shifted midlife from Aegean olives to Anatolian grains, signatures of transplant. Skulls oriented west toward Hellas suggested ritual or residue defiance, a final gaze homeward, defying Erasia's tide. This pit, dubbed the Virgin's Grave in preliminary reports, though ages spanned 18 to 40, proved the deportation's toll. Trauma markers, pubic pitting from repeated births, vertebral stress from labor, aligning with tablet tallies of processed females. Hanfmann felt it viscerally, pen pausing over field notes. These were not statistics, they were sisters, mothers, whose silence screams across millennia. Scientific rigor followed radiocarbon on associated fibulae, pegging Xerxes' era. Pollen traces confirming Lydian interment post-voyage. It corroborated Herodotus's lacunae, filling blanks with bone. Not 300 Spartans' mythic daughters, but Greek women anonymized in conquest's churn, their defilement a systemic scar. Why this matters pierces beyond antiquity, threading to our fractured now. These women teach power's peril when it weaponizes wombs, ethnic engineering that echoes in Uyghur camps or Balkan rapes, where bodies become battlegrounds for bloodlines. Psychologically, it's trauma's fractal. Stockholm's bonds in re-educated survivors, per Roxane's letter, mirroring modern captives, forging survival in submission's guise. Remembering fortifies against forgetting that enables recurrence. As Hannah Arendt warned in Eichmann, banality births, bureaucracy's beasts. Parallels sting. Today's disappeared in archives, DNA databases reclaiming identities like Hanfmann's spades. It's not about gods or glory. It's power's hubris when it erases peoples, and the refusal that endures nails scratching Greek on Persian clay, eyes west in death. The empire spanned 2 centuries, but couldn't bury 300 with their westward stare. Victory? Not in chains, but in the dig that resurrects, the witness that remembers. The women of that grave, the deportees whose names dissolved in Susa's steam, were meant to vanish. That was the blueprint, inked in royal clay. To be recast as concubines, their Greek lilting into Persian purrs, children schooled to forget the cradle's tongue, but they didn't dissolve. They're etched in the Persepolis ledgers that withstood Alexander's torch, in the epitaphs smuggled west on fragile scrolls, in the Sardis soil that clung to their bones like a lover's last grasp. And now, they're here, breathing through these words you've chosen to hold. Because you stayed. You let their westward gaze meet yours across 25 centuries, refusing the silence victors craved. You're not mere reader, you're witness, and witnesses are the past's lifeline, the ones who testify when pyres cool and roads straighten. To witness means bearing the weight without buckling, acknowledging the machine's hum in today's headlines, the deportee's flinch in a refugee's averted eye. It means grappling with why we sanitize history's underbelly, fearing its mirror to our complicities, the policies that sort, the silences that abet. These stories matter because they humanize the statistic, not 40,000 captives, but Lysandra's loom, Callus's, Calliope's empty hands, Sophia's defiant hum, Helena's marble judgment, Ariadne's unbroken fire. They connect to today's shadows, girls in Gaza tunnels, women in Ukrainian cellars, reminding that atrocity's grammar endures, but so does resistance's dialect. The shard clutched, the song whispered, the grave oriented home. What we owe the past: vigilance, voiced in votes and vigils; empathy, extended beyond borders; action, unearthing archives with tools sharper than spades, digital scans, survivor testimonies, curricula that don't flinch. We owe them the refusal to let erasure win, to honor their westward stare by turning our own toward justice's dawn. In doing so, we weave their threads into our tapestry, ensuring the machine's next iteration meets not compliance, but chorus. If this narrative stirred echoes in you, if Lysandra's vacant gaze, or the Sardis skulls facing west, struck a chord that lingers, leave a comment below. What line haunted you? What parallel from our world demands reckoning? Pose your questions. Let's converse in this space where darkness meets daylight. These exchanges, raw and reflective, are the true antidote conversations that transmute horror into horizon. If voices like theirs meant for oblivion, but clawing back resonate, subscribe. Not for spectacle, but solidarity. To fund digs that defy dust, translations that shatter seals, narratives that name the unnamed. For every silence plotted, a shout reclaimed. Xerxes reigned 13 years after Thermopylae, erecting a system that schooled every successor tyrant from Antiochus to Ataturk how to catalogue cruelty as custom. The blueprint persisted, etched in edicts and bones,